Sarah, a 32-year-old marketing manager, has been acting distant lately. Her boyfriend, Jake, a 35-year-old software developer, begins to notice changes that make him question the foundation of their relationship. From late-night text messages to sudden work events, Jake can't shake the feeling that something is off. Is Sarah hiding something, or is Jake overthinking? Let's uncover the subtle behaviors that may signal infidelity in a relationship and the emotional fallout that follows. It started subtly, so subtle, in fact, that Jake didn't notice at first. Sarah used to walk through the door after work with a bright smile and an eagerness to share every little detail of her day. But now, she seemed preoccupied. One Tuesday night, she came home much later than usual. Work ran late, she muttered, barely meeting his gaze as she placed her bag down. Jake brushed it off at first. Everyone has busy days. But as the late nights became more frequent, he began to notice a pattern. The stories Sarah shared about her day were shorter, less detailed, almost rehearsed. Her energy felt different, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. When Jake tried to bring it up casually, "Everything okay at work?" Sarah's response was short and defensive. "Why wouldn't it be?" she asked, almost as if his question was unreasonable. Jake let it drop, but the pit in his stomach lingered. Was he overthinking? Or was something genuinely wrong? Jake first noticed the change with her phone. Sarah, who used to leave her phone lying around the house, now kept it too close. It was always in her hand or tucked away in her pocket, and she never let it out of her sight. The buzzing notifications didn't help. Every time her phone lit up, she'd glance at it quickly and then flip it face down. One evening, while they were watching a movie, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Jake instinctively reached for it. "I'll get it," Sarah said sharply, grabbing it before he could. "It's just work." Her reaction stung. It wasn't like Jake hadn't seen her phone before, but now it felt off limits. Then came the password change. Jake tried not to make a big deal out of it, but the secrecy felt new and unsettling. When he gently asked why she was being so guarded, Sarah's response cut deep. "Don't you trust me?" she said, her voice tinged with frustration. Jake was left questioning himself. Was he being unreasonable, or was there a reason she was acting this way? "I just need some time to myself," Sarah said one Saturday morning as she laced up her sneakers for an impromptu solo walk. Jake, sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee, was caught off guard. Their weekends were sacred, usually spent exploring trails together or enjoying brunch at their favorite spot. But lately, Sarah had been craving more alone time, or so she claimed. At first, Jake tried to respect her newfound independence. After all, everyone needs a little space, right? But as her solo outings became more frequent, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Sarah would return from her me time with vague explanations about where she'd been. "Just needed to clear my head," she'd say, avoiding his eyes. One evening, she canceled their dinner plans, claiming she wanted to reconnect with herself. Jake couldn't help but wonder why now. And why did her need for space feel more like her pushing him away than finding herself? Jake finally mustered the courage to bring up his feelings. One night, as they sat on the couch, he gently said, "I feel like we've been a little distant lately. Is everything okay?" Sarah's reaction was immediate and intense. Her brows furrowed and she leaned back, crossing her arms. "So now I'm the problem," she snapped. "You're always looking for something to be wrong, Jake. Maybe you're just paranoid." Her words hit him like a ton of bricks. Jake wasn't a confrontational person, and Sarah knew that. Her sharp tone and accusations left him questioning himself. Was he being unreasonable? Was his growing unease just insecurity? From then on, anytime Jake tried to address the distance between them, Sarah would flip the narrative. She'd paint him as overly suspicious, even needy. It was as if she was rewriting the story, casting herself as the victim and him as the antagonist. Jake began to doubt his own reality, which only deepened his internal struggle. 3. The need for space. "I just need some time to myself," Sarah said one Saturday morning as she laced up her sneakers for an impromptu solo walk. Jake, sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee, was caught off guard. Their weekends were sacred, usually spent exploring trails together or enjoying brunch at their favorite spot. But lately, Sarah had been craving more alone time, or so she claimed. At first, Jake tried to respect her newfound independence. After all, everyone needs a little space, right? But as her solo outings became more frequent, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Sarah would return from her me time with vague explanations about where she'd been. "Just needed to clear my head," she'd say, avoiding his eyes. One evening, she canceled their dinner plans, claiming she wanted to reconnect with herself. Jake couldn't help but wonder why now. And why did her need for space feel more like her pushing him away than finding herself? 4. Shifting blame and gaslighting. Jake finally mustered the courage to bring up his feelings. One night, as they sat on the couch, he gently said, "I feel like we've been a little distant lately. Is everything okay?" Sarah's reaction was immediate and intense. Her brows furrowed, and she leaned back, crossing her arms. "So now I'm the problem," she snapped. "You're always looking for something to be wrong, Jake. Maybe you're just paranoid." Her words hit him like a ton of bricks. Jake wasn't a confrontational person, and Sarah knew that. Her sharp tone and accusations left him questioning himself. Was he being unreasonable? Was his growing unease just insecurity? From then on, anytime Jake tried to address the distance between them, Sarah would flip the narrative. She'd paint him as overly suspicious, even needy. It was as if she was rewriting the story, casting herself as the victim and him as the antagonist. Jake began to doubt his own reality, which only deepened his internal struggle. 5. Changes in physical intimacy. The first time Jake noticed, it was subtle, a quick hug that felt rushed, like Sarah was eager to move on. But as the days turned into weeks, the physical distance between them became undeniable. Sarah stopped initiating any kind of affection. The kisses they used to share in the mornings faded into polite nods. Holding hands became rare, and their once passionate nights together turned into a routine of turning out the lights and falling asleep on opposite sides of the bed. Jake tried to brush it off. Maybe she was stressed from work, he told himself. But the excuses began to wear thin when even small gestures of affection, like a playful touch on her arm, were met with indifference or worse, discomfort. One night, he reached out to hold her hand while they were watching TV. She pulled away almost instinctively, muttering something about being too tired. Jake sat there, staring at the blank screen, wondering how they had gone from inseparable to strangers sharing the same space. It was a casual Wednesday evening when Jake noticed the first crack in Sarah's story. She had come home later than usual, and, when asked, casually mentioned staying late at the office to help a colleague with a big presentation. Jake nodded, taking her words at face value. But the next day, while folding laundry, Sarah let something slip. "I'm so glad that project wrapped up last week. I finally feel like I can breathe again." Jake froze, replaying her words in his mind. The timelines didn't add up. If the project had ended last week, why had she been at the office so late last night? He didn't confront her right away. Instead, Jake began paying closer attention. Over the next few weeks, more inconsistencies emerged. Sarah's stories about where she'd been and who she'd been with didn't always align. Sometimes she would contradict herself in the same conversation. When Jake finally worked up the courage to point out one of these discrepancies, Sarah laughed it off. "You're overanalyzing," she said, brushing it aside as though he were imagining things. But Jake wasn't imagining anything. The more she laughed off his concerns, the more convinced he became that something wasn't right. "You know, you never really listen when I talk," Sarah said one morning, her voice laced with irritation. Jake looked up from his coffee, startled by the sudden critique. "What do you mean?" "I'm listening now," he replied, genuinely confused. But Sarah wasn't satisfied. "It's just, you don't make an effort like you used to," she added, her tone carrying a weight that felt deliberate. It wasn't just this moment. Jake began to notice a pattern. Sarah had started picking at small things about him, things she had once adored. His love for cheesy action movies became immature. His habit of leaving his shoes by the door was now lazy. Even his sense of humor, which had always made her laugh, was now childish. These criticisms weren't shouted in anger, they were subtle, almost offhanded remarks. But each one cut deeper than the last. Jake began to feel like he was constantly falling short, no matter how hard he tried. Then came the justifications. "I just want us to be better," Sarah would say after a particularly sharp comment. But Jake couldn't help but feel that her words were less about improvement and more about creating a narrative one where he was the problem. Jake had always loved Sarah's presence on social media. Her posts were lively and full of personality, fun snapshots of their adventures, candid photos of their cozy evenings, and heartfelt captions that made him feel valued and loved. But lately, her online presence had changed in ways he couldn't ignore. She started posting less about their relationship. Gone were the pictures of them together, replaced by solo shots and vague quotes about self-growth. Her account, once open and inviting, was now private, and Jake noticed she had changed her profile picture to one of her alone, smiling mysteriously. One evening, while scrolling through her followers, he saw unfamiliar names accounts with cryptic usernames and profile pictures that didn't reveal much. When he brought it up casually, Sarah shrugged. "I just cleaned up my friends list," she said. But Jake couldn't help but notice that she was spending more time scrolling on her phone, smiling at messages he wasn't privy to. The shift wasn't overt, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt. Social media had once been a shared space for them, a way to celebrate their life together. Now it felt like a wall he couldn't climb. It started with a new haircut. Jake thought Sarah looked amazing, but when he complimented her, she brushed it off, saying she just needed a change. Then came the new clothes, sleek, stylish outfits that replaced her usual comfortable wardrobe. Jake noticed she began spending more time in front of the mirror, perfecting her makeup and spraying on perfume she hadn't worn in years. At first, Jake chalked it up to Sarah wanting to feel good about herself. Everyone deserves a confidence boost, right? But the timing felt strange. She wasn't dressing up for their dates or special occasions. These efforts seemed reserved for days when she was going out alone or heading to work. One day, he teased her playfully, got someone to impress at the office expecting her to laugh. Instead, she gave him a fleeting smile and said, "What's wrong with wanting to look good for myself?" Jake couldn't argue with that, but the question lingered: was it really for herself, or was there someone else she was trying to catch the attention of? "Do you have to chew so loudly?" Sarah snapped one evening as they sat at the dinner table. Jake blinked, taken aback by the sudden irritation in her voice. It wasn't the first time she'd been uncharacteristically critical lately. Arguments over small, seemingly insignificant things like the way he folded the towels or the type of coffee he bought were becoming more frequent. The fights were never about the actual issues. They were a smokescreen for something deeper, Jake realized. Sarah's tone was sharper, her patience thinner, and her willingness to resolve things almost non-existent. She'd storm off or end the conversation abruptly, leaving Jake sitting alone with a sense of confusion and frustration. One night, after yet another pointless argument, Sarah blurted out, "I just feel like we're not connecting anymore." Her words stung, but they also gave Jake clarity. Was she picking fights to create distance, or was she trying to justify something she couldn't yet admit? As Jake pieced together these changes, he realized the importance of confronting the truth, not just about Sarah's behavior, but about the health of their relationship. Relationships thrive on trust, communication, and emotional connection. And ignoring red flags only deepens the wounds, but facing them can lead to understanding and, ultimately, growth. Thank you for watching this story. If it resonated with you, please like, share, and leave a comment below with your thoughts or experiences. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more insights into relationships and personal growth. See you in the next video.